This video is going to be completely different from the videos which I have done. I know that the channel is about computer science and mathematics, but I do like to now and again mix things up a little bit. Now, I haven't just been sitting over the last couple of years doing mathematics and computer science and the type of engineering and physics which I enjoy. I've also been reading an awful lot, and I thought I would take this opportunity just to go through some of the books that I've read over the last couple of years. Now, if you're not interested in that, of course you can just switch off, that's fair enough. But I'm going to go through this video and I'm going to put it on my channel anyway. So they're not in any particular order. I have them all sitting just here next to me. And I won't go through, they're not book reviews, I'm not going to go through full book reviews, and that would be impossible in the short time that I have in these videos. So the first one I'll go through that I've read is 1984 by George Orwell. It was always on my list for reading, but I'd never really got to reading it. So the actual book itself, it's a Penguin classic. The Penguin classics are nice books. They look really nice, but the cover tends to rub off. So my wife borrowed this one from me, and she had a read of it, and she was reading it on the bus in the train in the way in and out from work. And this was just sitting in her bag for a few weeks while she was reading it. So they're not really books to be taken out the house. They're books to be kept in the house. But I worked through this book, I read it, I did enjoy it, and I was quite surprised by the fact that it's actually, there's a love story within it. So a great read. I'm not going to go through book reviews because if you want big, really good book reviews, there's plenty online, but I read that one, really enjoyed. I get most of my books from the charity shops. Here in Scotland, where I'm living, I've got a local charity shop who sell every single book for 50p. So irrespective of what book they have, they put a little sticker on it and they say 50p, which in US dollars, I don't know, that's about 80 cents, something like that. And it wouldn't matter, even if it was a first edition of Newton's Principia, they would get it into the shop, they would realise it's a book, they would take it to the counter and they would stick a little stamp on it saying 50p. And I have actually bought some books there that I were worth in the region of a couple £100, and I've got them for 50p. Anyway, here's one of my charity shop books. This is my wife's favourite read, and she thought I would probably quite like it, and I've really enjoyed it. So it's The Complete Stories of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm not actually finished this, so it shouldn't really be on the list, but I am about halfway through it, and I decided I was wanting to slow down because I was reading it so quickly and I was enjoying it so much. I wanted it to last a bit longer, so I've decided just to pick out a story once a week and go through a story once a week. It's just really so as I can take my time reading it. I love it as well. I understand why my wife loves Sherlock Holmes. Actually, when I started reading it, in the very first page in which Sherlock Holmes appeared, I actually got shivers coming down my spine because I knew Sherlock Holmes. I've known him from his films and I've known him since childhood, but I've never actually really met the man, and I have met the man now. Fascinating thing about this book is that Sherlock Holmes, he did like to do cocaine and drugs, and drugs are mentioned throughout this, and they wouldn't be able to write this book now, or well, if it's politically incorrect in lots of different ways. But great stories, and I'm still enjoying it. So what we got? One of my big reads last year, again the Penguin classics, The Count of Monte Cristo, and that's a big old read. It's a big old book. I don't know, 1200 pages long. I did enjoy it. I've got some other Alexander Dumas books there, and I'm going to be reading through them. A brilliant read. I think it tended to last a bit longer than it really needed to, but when I went online to check it, it did say that originally the book came out as excerpts, so it was little chapters at a time that were in like kind of literary books through in the late 1800s. That's what they tended to do. So obviously the longer he kept it going, the more money he was going to make out of it. So he did drag it on a little bit at the end. But even though it was dragged on, it was still good. It was still good stuff. But it probably could have lost a few hundred pages at the end. But that, definitely to be recommended. And again, this is the Penguin Classic. And I read this one in the house. And it's still actually in decent condition. So you can hear by the noise it makes. You know it's a good book. Let's see. This shouldn't actually be on the list because I did read it more than 2 years ago. But I've Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyevich, and Other Stories. There's good stories in it, and you know, positive stories in it, and of course The Death of Ivan Ilyevich, which is quite heavy going, you know. But again, Tolstoy is actually one of those writers that, because it's a classic, and he's a you know, one of the greatest novelists of all time, I just assumed that the writing was going to be extremely difficult, but it's actually the opposite, because he writes in a format called realism. So he obviously tries to make characters as real as possible, and the way he does that is by conveying what they're like in a really easy to read, simple language, you know. So some good stories in that. H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds. Again, just books that I've seen over years. I've always known it has existed, but I've never picked them up and read them. Again, it's just a great read. You know, what is it with the Victorian writers that they come up with such great material? And it's not a long book either, a couple hundred pages, 170, 180 pages. It's and another easy read. Let's have a look to see. Oh, of course, Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre. I really like Charlotte Bronte, and I will definitely be reading some other of her books. The first few hundred pages just had me absolutely nailed. She just nailed it, and it grabbed me and it pulled me all the way through. Just another great, fantastic read. So I would highly recommend some Charlotte Bronte. So apologies if you're looking at this and thinking, computer science, mathematics. What next? A picture of Dorian Gray. I read this on holiday. So I took this on holiday, and again, it's a Penguin Classic, and it fared quite well. The cover's not really wasted too badly. There's some passages in this that are maybe 4 or 5 pages long that are just nuts. They're brilliant. You know, generally when it comes to books, you know, I tend to want it to be move on at a high pace and things to be happening. But this goes through pages and pages and pages of descriptions, and the language is just immense. It's just absolutely beautiful. So that is a great read. That is just it's a nice 2-week lying on the beach holiday read. The 39 Steps, a great short story. My wife borrowed this as well, and she read it on the way up, back and forward on the train from work. Great little story, you know, what's to be said. Pick it up and read it. Last year as well, this was my first Tolstoy that I read. It was Anna Karenina. Another amazing read. Although I've seen a lot of book reviews on it, people saying it changed their lives and stuff like that, and I'm thinking, well, I'm a man of 53 and with wife and children, and I'd imagine if I read it when I was like 33 or 23, maybe it would have made a bit of a difference, but it kind of told me a lot of things that I already know. And I'm happy when I read it. I thought, yeah, okay, I understood what he was trying to tell us, but I was kind of thinking, I kind of worked that out already, which made me feel quite good, actually. But still, it's a great read. And if you're 20, 30, 40, maybe 50, I don't know, maybe you want to pick it up and have a read of it. Let me see. Now, I went through my Evelyn Waugh phase as well. So I've got Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. I had watched the TV adaptation, the BBC one, and I always liked it. I thought it was quite good. I read through the book, and you know, I kind of like Evelyn Waugh, but there's a part of me that you know, he's got a middle class, middle England perspective on the world. Did I enjoy it? I think I probably enjoyed the BBC TV adaptation better than the book, which doesn't generally happen. Normally I would always enjoy the book more than any other person's adaptation of it. But certainly a modern classic. And they're nice little books as well, these ones. It's the Penguin Modern Classics. Another Evelyn Waugh, Decline and Fall. I really enjoyed that. I did really enjoy that one. I had seen there's another BBC adaptation of it, which with Jack, I forget his second name, a comedian, Jack the comedian, and he was in this, and after seeing it I've got the book and I read it, and I enjoyed the book even more than his adaptation. Or the adaptation that he was in. So really, a humorous book, a comic book, definitely worth a read. Under the Greenwood Tree, Thomas Hardy. I think that if my wife tried to read this, but my wife is of Ukrainian descent, and the kind of language that was written in it, it was written with a particular dialect in mind, and it was awkward for me at first picking it up and reading it. So my wife found it really quite difficult, and she didn't want to read it because of that. Whereas I obviously have been English my first language. I kind of understood the accent. I knew what he was trying to say, but at times it was still difficult, and I almost kind of thought it would be nice if you just wrote in English rather than an anglified dialect. You know, it would have got the story across easier. But then, of course, I had to put a lot of effort into reading it, and of course, you only ever really get as much reward as the effort that you actually put into anything. So, excuse me, I'm talking too long. Now, another book that I was really weird. I got a really weird reaction when I read this book, and it was Graham Greene's Brighton Rock. I didn't like it, and I couldn't work out whether I didn't like it because I didn't like the story, or I didn't like the character. I didn't like the main character, and I couldn't separate where they were and the lives they were living and the characters from my own feeling about the book. Because I didn't like the actual characters, I didn't like the book. You know, it was a bit of a strange one, but it was actually a bit of a work, if I have to say, all the way through it, and it's absolutely nuts. No book has ever done this to me before, but I didn't like it until it came up to the very last line of the book, and I'll actually read the very last line of the book, and if you've read Brighton Rock, you'll know what it's all about. She walked rapidly in the thin June sunlight towards the worst horror of all. Now, if you haven't read the book, it means nothing to you. But if you read through the book, I read that last line and it sent shivers down my spine, and I just thought, oh, you know, and I kind of got the book. It was brilliant. See, after that, I thought that was fantastic. So I'll definitely go ahead and I'll read another Graham Greene book. Now let's have a look and see. C.S. Foster, Midshipman Hornblower. Again, I've watched Hornblower on the TV, watched the adaptations, read the book, enjoyed the book. It's an easy read. It's a good read if you want to learn about ships and the different parts of, you know, sailing ships. And it'd be a good. I actually went online and I pulled out an image with all the different areas of the ship. And you could actually learn a little bit about that from the book. So again, a nice book. I think it was one of Churchill's favourite reads, if I remember right. Let's have a look and see. Now, through a book that I shouldn't put in my list because I never finished it. I couldn't. It's something I couldn't do. Don Quixote. Now, people will be looking at this and thinking, but wait a minute, that's a classic. That's a brilliant book. I just couldn't get into it. I almost felt that it was someone with a mental health issue and everyone was making a fool of him. And it just didn't sit well with me. So I got through book one. It's in 2 books. So I got through book 1 and I just couldn't get into it. I've left the book 2 for later on. So I'm hoping that maybe some point in the future I'll feel differently about it and I'll think, well, let's get book 2 and I'll read through book 2. So it's still in my list to finish. Again, a book that I read, it's maybe shouldn't be in the list because I read it more than a couple of years ago, was Shantaram, Gregory David Roberts. A fantastic read based on the true story of Gregory David Roberts. They were due to make a film starring Johnny Depp, I believe, but it got called off just before COVID. I don't know whether they're going to look at doing that again, but an amazing story based on a true story, you know. So, and then an international bestseller as well. So, a great read. Well, that's an old one. I read that years ago. Howard's End. Again, it was okay, but a lot of these books of this period, you know, it's a middle upper class England, and I always feel that when I read them, I'm a bit of a phony because I know that if I was alive at that time, I would have been the person working down in the cellar, shoveling the coal, or serving the tea, and I wouldn't have a life, you know. I would just be one of the servants who were not real people, you know, because they've not been educated and they don't know anything, you know, so they're kind of like a lower class. That's where I would have been. So when I read these books, I always kind of think to myself, yeah, that's all very good, but, you know, I would have been a nothing if I was there at that time, you know. Interesting thought. But Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. My brother got me this one, and it's an amazing quality of book. Waterstones produced this book. Charles Dickens, an amazing read. I'll definitely be reading more Charles Dickens. I've got some more in the library here. So down to the last 3-4 books, and then that'll be us. Vintage Bulgakov. My wife suggested this. Did enjoy it. Short books, quite simple book, and it was a bit nuts, the storyline, but it was good. Did enjoy it. Another Bulgakov, A Country Doctor's Notebook. I enjoyed that as well. Apart from the last little bit, it seemed to tail off at the end. He found some manuscript about with his friend who'd committed suicide, and then he went off on this tangent, which I think it seemed to me be a bit of like a filler for the book. But apart from that, I did enjoy it. Jane Austen, Northern Jarabe. And again, I read these period dramas, and it's a bit of a chick flick, really, a chick book. I felt anyway. Certainly wasn't any Ernest Hemingway, you know. But I enjoyed it. But again, I kind of looked at it and thought to myself, yeah, who am I in this book? You know, I'm the servant. Finally, well, Murder on the Orient Express. I thought I would read some Agatha Christie. Did I like it? So. Characterization and, you know, or description and stuff. It read more like a film script. You know, it's a perfect film script. It would be easy to make a film based on this because it's like a script. And actually, when I watched Agatha Christie's the actual films and their TV programs, I prefer them. They're better because you learn more about the characters. Because you don't tell you much about the characters here. She generates characters in order to produce a plot and continue it along with a plot. But I don't think there's an awful lot of depth to it. But the actual construct, you know, of the book, you know, the murders are fantastic. So a bit, not really for me. I don't know if I'll be reading any more Agatha Christie. So that's all. That's what I've covered in the last couple of years, as well as doing my mathematics and physics and computer science stuff that I like to do, and putting all my courses together and doing YouTube videos. So it's been a busy time. That's all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. It's just something different, and the next one will be back to our maths, physics, computer science. Goodbye.